The NFL draft is only getting closer. As we sit here today, Wednesday, April 15th, we are less than 10 days away from the 2026 NFL draft. And Dane Brugler of The Athletic and ESPN's Mel Kiper released their most recent Jacksonville Jaguars mock drafts. And on today's Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports, we are going to be reacting to it. I am your host, Cullen Brown, and proud to say that this episode of Jags Now is sponsored by Prize Picks. And guys, I just want to get a pulse check. You love the Jacksonville Jaguars? I think we all do, right? If you do, hit that like button. It's a great way to show support here on the channel. It's free and easy. It helps get this video out to more people that also love the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you want to help grow this community, it's a free way to do it and be greatly appreciated. Hit that like button, guys. All right, so we're going to start with Dane Brugler's kind of mock draft here, who I think this first pick is probably the most questionable one, in my opinion, at 56 overall. And it's not because of the player. Gennings dunker out of the University of Iowa is somebody that I think is worthy of a round 2 selection, round 3 or round 4, or round 3 or round 2 kind of selection. But I don't know for the Jaguars how necessary it is to go after an offensive lineman in round 2. I'll be honest, especially with your lone second-round pick. And Dunker had a really productive year for Iowa last season. You see the numbers on your screen, only allowed 2 sacks, 3 penalties, playing on the outside at tackle, although he is more likely going to transition to a guard at the next level. In fact, Dane Brugler said as much about Jennings Dunker whenever he posted the Beast, which is a great draft guy kind of just tool to use. If you haven't used it already, I would highly recommend it. He had this to say about Jennings Dunker. Dunker has inconsistent reactionary skills on an island, but his square power, fierce hands, and aggressive mentality belong on an NFL field. He projects as a guard with starting potential and tackle flexibility. And again, he's not a bad player, but an offensive lineman with your only second-round pick, and I get it that Dane Brugler is having to do this entire 7-round mock draft around all 32 NFL teams, so he can't necessarily be as dialed in on each pick, but if I'm picking for the Jaguars, I've said it ad nauseum, anywhere in that front 7, to me, you can't miss. Whether you want to go linebacker, you want to go defensive tackle, you want to go edge. I would consider interior offensive lineman, I guess, a secondary kind of ish need. I prefer kind of more of a swing tackle option, but I could see the argument made for interior offensive lineman, but not after those first 3 positions. And to be honest, I'd even include tight end as a more pressing need than interior offensive lineman. And I think Jennings Dunker could be somebody that if you want him to kind of be your, lead guy off the bench, as it were, if something were to happen to one of your starters, I wouldn't necessarily mind it, but this one was kind of puzzling from Dane Brugler, if I'm being completely honest. Moving on to the first of 3 third-round picks. There was no trades in this mock draft from Dane Brugler, but he did have the Jaguars with their first pick in the 3rd round, going with Jaishawn Barham, the edge out of Michigan. And we're going to talk about him more in here in just a second. But before we get into Jaishawn Barham, let's hear from our sponsors here at Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The playoffs are here for basketball, baseball is underway, and it's time to cash in with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best way to win cash while watching sports. If you're a hoops guy, you can go with points, rebounds, assists, blocks, or 3-pointers in your lineup. If you're more of a seam head, you can choose hits, home runs, or strikeouts. Prize Picks has a ton of options that you can go with. The app is really easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. For this episode of Jags Now, I've got a lineup for a season-long prediction for the upcoming football season. I got Trevor Lawrence more on his passing yards. He's hit 4,000 yards 3 times in his career. Give me the more on his stats. And I think the sky's the limit for Teteroa McMillan. I've got the more on his receiving touchdowns. You can copy my picks or you can fade my picks. This lineup right here, if you put $20 down, you can win up to $60 with our friends over at Prize Picks. You guys can also follow me on the app to see all of my lineups at CullenBro21. So make sure if you guys want to fade my picks or follow them, you know where to do so. We also have a new offer. Download the Prize Picks app today with the link in the comments and the description and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, getting into Jaishawn Barham. The scouting report on him, as courtesy of our draft guy here at Chat Sports, Tom Downey, had this to say about him. Good run defender from both the edge and linebacker spots. Really interesting flashes of athletic ability with bend and dip. Still needs development as a pass rusher. And I think there's a lot of good things to like about Jaishawn Barham. He's one of the more polarizing edges in this kind of draft class. And what really made this pick kind of interesting for me was not only did Dane Brugler have him going to the Jaguars in the third round with their first third round pick at 81 overall, but Mel Kiper, who also had the Jaguars and released his kind of mock draft, he did a 2-round mock draft, which, by the way, Mel Kiper, what are we doing here? This is your final mock draft, and you're releasing it, A, only a 2-rounder, but B, you're only also releasing it 8 days before the end of the, or before the 2026 NFL draft starts. Like, what are we doing, Mel? I mean, what if Dexter Lawrence gets traded? Like, are you not just going to do another mock draft? Does that not shake up things? I digress. But Mel Kiper had the Jaguars selecting Jaishawn Barham with the 56th overall pick in his mock draft. Here's what Mel Kiper had to say about Jaishawn Barham and his potential to be drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. He said, quote, "The Jaguars don't have a first-round pick, but they do have 11 total selections, so they have the chance to attack some needs. One of them is edge rusher, as he ranked 27th in sacks last season with 32. Barham is an intriguing player to watch on day 2, as he could be a good fit in Jacksonville. He had 4 sacks and 23 pressures last season. I like the position more than Dane Brugler's at 56th overall, but I'd rather have Barham in the third round like Brugler did. So it was a kind of bit of a mixed bag, if I'm being completely honest, about Jaishawn Barham. And I do think that there are some things about his game that are intriguing. I think he could develop behind a Josh Hines-Allen or Trayvon Walker and be a complimentary kind of third edge rusher competing with Danny Strigo. But, man, Mel, he's been a lead draft guy for ESPN for, it feels like, my entire life and then some. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time. But, I mean, come on, what are we doing here? I just think a developmental pass rusher that I'm not even sure is going to be fully ready to contribute on day 1 in terms of a even situational role is somebody that you would want to target in the second round. Now, third round, I understand it. He could be more of a rotational edge, so I agree with Dane Brugler on that one. And I do like the player. I just don't love him in the second round, but you guys let me know where you would take Jaishawn Barham if you had the choice. Moving on to Dane Brugler's second of 3 third-round picks. He had the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Justin Jolly, the tight end out of NC State. And I know we've already kind of been talking about it, but when is Brenen Strange going to get extended? And I do think he's the tight end 1 for this team for the foreseeable future. But adding a guy like Justin Jolly, who I did a little bit more research whenever he was selected by Dane Brugler in this kind of mock draft, and I really like what he could potentially bring to this Jaguars offense. He had 49 catches for almost 500 yards, 7 touchdowns last season. We have a little scouting report on Justin Jolly saying, fluid athlete with elite body control, framing and consistent results in contested catches, strong hands with few drops and fumbles, iffy run blocker, and has room to grow as a route runner. And I don't necessarily mind this pick either, because if you've been kind of paying attention to where the Jacksonville Jaguars have, been trending in terms of, their kind of pre-draft visits with some of these NFL draft prospects, one position in particular that they've really kind of dove in on, was the tight end position. And I do think Justin Jolly being that vertical threat, being that pass-catching threat, somebody that, with Brenen Strange, you kind of get a do-it-all person that can block for you, that can catch passes, could be an inline or spread out. I think Justin Jolly would bring another element to this offense, and that could really make things explosive and give more creative ability to Liam Cohen when game planning on Sundays going up against NFL defenses. I think he'd be a really good fit next to Brenen Strange, and I really do like the selection here by Dane Brugler. Moving on to the final third-round pick, and this is somebody that, I'm not going to lie, you want to talk about box office, you want to talk about just taking the top off the defense, the man who had the fastest 40-yard dash, I know by wide receivers, I'm not sure if he had it entirety at the combine, Brenen Thompson, the wide receiver out of Mississippi State, who, yes, he is undersized, vertical threat, but was really good at it. I mean, he was a guy that, you see the numbers on your screen, 57 receptions for over 1,000 yards in the SEC. It's not nothing. Does a nice job avoiding jams and press, so he's not, threatened by, just getting jammed up at the line of scrimmage, and needs to add another element to his game to make it fully in the NFL. That being said, if you're the Jaguars, right, you obviously got Brian Thomas Jr., you've got Parker Washington, you've got all these receivers that could contribute on your offense, Jakobi Meyers as well. Travis Hunter, we'll kind of see what his role is as getting into the point of the season. If you had a guy like Brenen Thompson, who can sit there and stretch the field and just be a designated, hey, you always have to account for where he is whenever you're lining up. And the fact that he could just get you a couple of cheap touchdowns, maybe even contribute in on the special teams game aspect of it. When I initially saw the pick, I was like, I'm not really sure about this one. But now thinking about, what he could add offensively, I think he could be a really interesting option for the Jags in the 2026 NFL Draft, somebody that we hadn't really talked about. And I think he's scheduled to go kind of in that third or fourth round, or projected, I should say, in that third or fourth round range. So I wouldn't mind this necessarily at all if I'm James Gladstone and I want to add Brenen Thompson here at the end of the third round. Moving on to your lone fourth round pick, Dane Brugler had the Jacksonville Jaguars finally addressing the linebacker position, and they went with Kaleb Elarms-Orr, the linebacker out of TCU. And obviously we all know that the Jaguars lost Devin Lloyd during this free agency period. And Foye Oluokun is somebody that is expected to kind of shoulder the load. We'll see what Ventrell Miller's role is going to be in terms of, him stepping in and potentially also contributing snaps. You also have Dennis Gardeck, who you bring back, but he's more of kind of a front-facing linebacker. Dane Brugler had this to say on Kaleb Elarms-Orr, and based on my own kind of just research on him, I completely agree with his kind of sentiment here. He had this to say. Elarms-Orr needs to continue to maturing his eye discipline and development in coverage, but he is explosive in short areas and has the range to cover ground. Given his athleticism and football character, teams like his floor as a special teamer with talents to become more. And I've kind of cooled at the linebacker spot in terms of you necessarily need to draft one, at 56 overall. Like, it's got to be the first position that you address if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. And while I still think that linebacker is a position that the Jaguars need to draft and need to have somebody, I wouldn't necessarily hate if they went the developmental round, on day 3 if they just don't like any linebackers on the board. Now, I think there's going to be a happy medium there. We've talked about some of the linebacker prospects that the Jaguars could potentially look to draft, whether that's Anthony Hill, whether that's Jake Golday. We've mentioned some other names throughout the kind of history of the show, Josiah Trotter, whether you want Keyshawn Elliott. There's some other guys on day 2 that the Jaguars could look to target. I mean, C.J. Allen's dropping for crying out loud. It seems like by the day, could he potentially be there at 56? Regardless, I think if you want to go this route of getting a developmental linebacker to kind of sit and learn behind some veterans like Ventrell Miller, like Foye Oluokun, I wouldn't necessarily hate it if I'm the Jaguars, and Dane Brugler has them going this direction in round 4. Moving into more day 3 picks here, and we're going to start off with round 5, pick number 164. We've got Rayshaun, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, who I've said it all along, the Jaguars really need to get younger at that defensive tackle spot. And I don't love the fact that defensive tackle, it took them all the way till round 5 to address it. That being said, if they do plan on keeping Eric Armstead and Devon Hamilton, which I'm not sure how likely that actually is, Rayshaun is a good option there in the 5th. On 1.5 sacks, 18 pressures. He's not going to give you the most from a pass rushing element, but I do think that he provides a youthful element to his game that Jacksonville desperately needs to add to their kind of defensive line. And you brought back Mac Dickerson. We've said it ad nauseum. The youngest out of your 3 main defensive tackles at this point is 29 years old. You need to get some youth there. This was kind of a necessity pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars here in round 5. Moving on to 166, a couple picks later here. Dane Brugler has the Jaguars going with Michael Taaffe, the safety out of Texas, who he's been lauded for his leadership and somebody that I think would be willing to do kind of the dirty work when it comes to where and if he gets drafted this upcoming NFL draft cycle here next week. And he was somebody on a Texas Longhorns defense that is a really cool story if you kind of, do your research on it. I think he's somebody that, if you're looking at the Jaguars kind of secondary, obviously Antonio Johnson is going to be kind of the spearhead back there. Murray's going to be the other safety alongside of him. If you get in a guy like Michael Taaffe, I think it could be a really nice addition for the Jacksonville Jaguars to kind of invest in somebody like a culture setter that's willing to do the dirty work, contribute on special teams. And I think that's what Michael Taaffe is at the next level. I've seen him go as high as round 4, even sneaking into round 3 in a couple of mocks. So the fact you're able to get him in round 5, I think was really nicely done by Dane Brugler. All right, moving on to round number 6, your lone 6th round pick, Hezekiah Masses. I'm hopefully pronouncing that right. The cornerback out of the University of Cal. You need some depth behind your kind of core 4 cornerbacks, and Masses actually did fairly well in coverage last season for the University of California. 49.2% completion percentage allowed in coverage. You did give up 4 touchdowns, but he also had 5 picks and 18 pass breakups. He's a little bit of a boomer bust corner that I think if you're Jacksonville and you're obviously going to have Travis Hunter, you're going to have Jordan Lewis in the slot, you're going to have Jarian Jones contributing at some level. You obviously brought back Monteric Buster Brown. I wouldn't necessarily mind another corner as a depth piece, but no earlier than day 3. And I think that Dane Brugler had a pretty interesting choice here for the Jacksonville Jaguars in round number 6. All right, just going to kind of run through these final 7th-round draft picks for the Jacksonville Jaguars from Dane Brugler. Colbie Young, tall wide receiver from the University of Georgia, around 6'4". He ran a 4.49 40-yard dash. Tough to tackle. He just kind of has to learn the nuances of route running. I think Brugler had a 4th or 5th round grade on him initially when he released the beast, so he is somebody that the Jaguars could look to add there in the 7th. Aamil Wagner, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. We said it ad nauseum. I'm over the Chuma Edoga experience. Get me an offensive tackle, a swing tackle option next to Walker Little. He's got long arms, light feet, and he's durable. I think he's hardly missed any time during his collegiate career at Notre Dame. And then Joe, I'm going to look up this name because I looked it up how to pronunciate it here in just a second, so I apologize for that. But the quarterback out of UConn who has really got a nice fluid motion here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He needs to develop in terms of as a passer. As I pull this up here literally on the fly, I apologize in advance. I just want to make sure I pronounce this name correctly. Joe Fagnano out of UConn. Definitely not how it looks as you see on screen, but fluid throwing motion, doesn't turn the ball over. I think it's a 7th-round option if you want him to kind of compete there for a practice squad. I don't necessarily mind it in round number 7. Those are all 11 of the Jacksonville Jaguars picks made by Dane Brugler, and I'm just going to ask you guys straight up, are you a fan of this Dane Brugler mock draft? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know down in the comments section. And again, guys, if you enjoy this kind of draft coverage that we're bringing you here on the channel, make sure you guys give it a like, tell your friends, share the video, hit that subscribe button, do all that cool stuff. It would be really appreciated here. Until we see you guys on the next one, peace out.